Are you ready to reclaim your power? What I'm about to share with you could be the single most transformative moment in how you handle toxic relationships. If you've ever felt manipulated, drained, or like you're losing yourself in a relationship, then this is for you. Today, Shi Heng Yi is going to break down exactly how narcissists operate and give you one simple tool, a single sentence that can shift the balance of power forever. This isn't just advice, it's a lifeline. So stay with me, because by the end of this, you'll have everything you need to take back control, protect your energy, and make them fear losing their grip on you. Are you ready? Let's dive in. Dealing with someone who twists your words, drains your energy, and leaves you questioning your own reality is exhausting. And if you've experienced this, let me tell you something right now. You are not crazy. You're likely dealing with a narcissist. These individuals aren't just difficult. They're calculated manipulators who thrive on confusion, validation, and control. But here's the good news. Once you understand their playbook, you hold all the cards. And today, I'm giving you access to that playbook so you can stop being a pawn in their game. Narcissists operate from a place of deep insecurity masked by arrogance, manipulation, and an insatiable need for control. They seek out people who are empathetic, kind, and self-reflective, not because they value those traits, but because they exploit them. Over time, they chip away at your confidence, distort your perception of reality, and leave you feeling isolated, confused, and second-guessing yourself. It's a slow erosion of your sense of self, leaving you wondering if you're the problem. But here's the truth. Their behavior is not about you. Narcissists don't treat you poorly because you failed them in some way. They do it because that's how they maintain power. Their entire strategy is designed to keep you emotionally reactive, off balance, and chasing their approval. The more you try to fix things, explain yourself, or prove your worth, the tighter their grip becomes. That's why awareness is the first step toward reclaiming your power. Once you realize that their actions aren't a reflection of your value, you begin to see their behavior for what it truly is: a pattern, not a coincidence. So how do we dismantle this cycle? How do we take back our autonomy and stop feeding into their need for control? The answer lies in three key areas: understanding their motivations, setting boundaries, and practicing emotional detachment. When you master these tools, you become untouchable. You become someone they cannot manipulate, destabilize, or control. And the best part? It starts with just one sentence. The sentence that ends the game: "I'm not available for this conversation." This phrase might seem simple, but its impact is profound. Why? Because it does something narcissists hate. It creates a boundary without offering fuel for their manipulation. Narcissists feed off engagement. They want to pull you into circular arguments, provoke emotional reactions, and keep you defending yourself so they can stay in control. But when you say, "I'm not available for this conversation," you cut the cord. You refuse to play the game. You signal that their tactics no longer work on you, that you're in charge of your energy, your time, and your emotional space. Let's break down why this response works so well and why it can be such a powerful tool when dealing with narcissistic behavior. At first glance, "I'm not available for this conversation" seems simple, almost passive. But in reality, it's one of the most strategic and emotionally intelligent statements you can make in the face of manipulation. First, it disrupts their entire strategy. Narcissists thrive on what psychologists often refer to as cognitive dissonance, a state of mental confusion and emotional instability created by conflicting messages, shifting expectations, and constant contradiction. Their tactics are carefully designed to keep you off balance. One minute, they're criticizing you for something minor. The next, they escalate into an all-out argument over something you didn't even say. Then, just as quickly, they switch roles and act like the victim of your supposed cruelty, all within the same interaction. It's a psychological maze, and the goal is always the same: to keep you emotionally hooked, constantly reacting, and questioning your own judgment. They want you chasing explanations, defending yourself against moving targets, and feeling guilty for simply existing in their world. It's exhausting, confusing, and deeply destabilizing. But when you respond with, "I'm not available for this conversation," you do something radical. You step outside of their maze entirely. You refuse to play their game. You remove yourself from the cycle before it can spiral further. In that moment, you're not arguing, justifying, or explaining. You're not giving them the emotional reaction they crave. Instead, you're taking back control not through confrontation, but through conscious withdrawal. This kind of response strips them of their power. Narcissists rely on your emotional engagement to maintain dominance. Without it, their tactics fall flat. There's no one to provoke, no one to confuse, no one to gaslight. And in that silence or absence, they lose their leverage. More importantly, you protect your peace. Every time you engage in these cycles, you risk internalizing their distortions, doubting your own reality, and depleting your emotional reserves. But by choosing not to participate, you send a clear message. I value my energy more than I care about proving myself to you right now. That kind of self-respect is not only healing, it's transformative. This isn't about avoidance, it's about discernment. It's understanding that not every conversation is worth having, and not every person deserves access to your emotional space, especially when their intent is not connection, but control. So when faced with manipulation, chaos, or emotional baiting, remember, sometimes the strongest thing you can say is nothing at all. Or better yet, a quiet but firm, I'm not available for this conversation. Because in walking away, you're not losing, you're winning. Second, this sentence doesn't just disrupt their strategy, it actively protects your peace. That might sound simple, but in the thick of an emotionally charged interaction, maintaining inner calm can feel nearly impossible. Narcissists are experts at hijacking your emotional state, pulling you into endless debates, circular arguments, or manipulative explanations that leave you feeling drained, confused, and questioning yourself. But when you say, I'm not available for this conversation, you create a clean, firm exit. You don't open the door for negotiation or give them the chance to pull you deeper into the conflict. There's no ambiguity, no room for misinterpretation, and most importantly, no invitation for them to twist your words or guilt-trip you into staying engaged. Think about how many times you've tried to explain yourself only to have your words turned against you. How often have you attempted to reason with someone who isn't interested in reason, but in control? This response eliminates all of that. It cuts through the noise and gives you back something invaluable, agency over your own energy and emotional space. And if they push back, and they probably will, you simply repeat the phrase or walk away. No defense, no justification, just clarity. You're not giving them a new argument to dissect or a vulnerability to exploit. You're stating a boundary with such calm finality that it leaves little room for manipulation. This kind of consistency is powerful. It shows that you are not easily rattled, that you won't be baited into drama, and that your peace is not up for negotiation. Over time, this sends a strong message. You cannot shake me. I am grounded in my own truth, and I will not sacrifice my well-being for the sake of your chaos. What makes this approach so effective is that it's not reactive, it's intentional. It's not fueled by anger or frustration, but by self-respect. It reflects a deep understanding that some conversations aren't meant to be had, and some people aren't worth the emotional toll they demand. By choosing this path, you reclaim your power not through confrontation, but through composure. Not through force, but through discipline. And in doing so, you protect something far more valuable than the outcome of any argument, your inner peace. Because once you learn how to guard that, everything else becomes clearer, healthier, stronger. So next time you feel the pull of an unnecessary battle, remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is step away with grace, with dignity, and with unwavering clarity. I'm not available for this conversation. And that's enough. Third, and perhaps most importantly, this response empowers you. Every time you choose to say, I'm not available for this conversation, you reinforce a powerful truth. You don't have to show up to every fight you're invited to. You are not obligated to engage with chaos, defend your boundaries endlessly, or explain your feelings to someone who has no real interest in understanding them. That alone is revolutionary. In a world that often equates strength with confrontation and self-worth with being heard at all costs, choosing silence and, more importantly, intentional withdrawal can feel counterintuitive. But true power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it speaks softly and walks away. And every time you walk away from manipulation, confusion, or emotional baiting, you make a bold declaration. I value my peace more than I care about winning an argument. I honor my energy more than I crave validation. I choose clarity over conflict. By declaring your unavailability, you're not disappearing, you're asserting yourself. You're making a statement of self-worth so clear and unwavering that it cannot be ignored. You're saying, I am not going to be dragged into chaos. I will not be manipulated, gaslit, or controlled. I will not allow your drama to dictate my emotional state. That's not weakness. That's self-respect in its purest form. And for a narcissist, that kind of quiet confidence is absolutely terrifying. Because they thrive on uncertainty. They feed off confusion, guilt, and emotional entanglement. What they can't tolerate is detachment. A person who refuses to react, who doesn't flinch under pressure, who steps out of the ring instead of swinging back, that disrupts their entire dynamic. It removes their power source. You become unpredictable in the best way, unshakable, unreachable. Every time you use this sentence, you build resilience not just against manipulation, but against the internalized belief that you must always prove yourself, always justify your choices, always accommodate others at the cost of your own well-being. You begin to trust yourself more, to believe in your instincts, to recognize that your peace is not negotiable and your presence is not owed to anyone who would misuse it. This kind of empowerment doesn't come from grand gestures or dramatic confrontations. It comes from small, consistent acts of self-honor, from choosing yourself again and again, even when it feels uncomfortable or unfamiliar. From realizing that your worth does not depend on someone else's approval, nor does your truth need validation from those who refuse to see it. So the next time you feel the pull to explain, defend, or engage, pause, take a breath, then remind yourself, I am not available for this conversation. And mean it. Because in that moment, you're not just walking away from a toxic exchange. You're stepping deeper into your power. Why consistency is your greatest strength. Now, here's the thing. Using this sentence once won't magically solve everything. Narcissists are masters at testing boundaries. If you say it once and then revert to old patterns the next time they push, they'll know it was just a tactic, not a real shift. They're incredibly perceptive when it comes to sensing inconsistency, and they thrive on exploiting it. That's why consistency is crucial, not just in words, but in actions, mindset, and emotional response. When you repeatedly use this phrase calmly, firmly, and without emotional charge, it becomes more than just a boundary. It becomes your new standard of engagement. It signals that you are no longer operating under their rules or within their emotional framework. You are establishing a new reality, one where manipulation doesn't work, guilt trips fall flat, and gaslighting has no foothold. You're no longer someone they can manipulate with ease. You're no longer a source of emotional supply they can tap into whenever they feel insecure or bored. Instead, you become something entirely unfamiliar to them, a person who knows their worth and protects it, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it feels unnatural or difficult. This transformation doesn't happen overnight. At first, you might feel like you're faking it. You may second-guess yourself or worry that you're being too harsh, too cold, or too unfeeling. But what you're really doing is reprogramming years, maybe even decades of conditioned behavior. You're learning how to prioritize your peace, your energy, and your emotional well-being over the approval or validation of someone who will never truly give it freely. Consistency builds credibility. When a narcissist sees that your words match your actions, every single time that you don't waver, apologize, or justify, you begin to strip away their control. Their confusion grows, their usual tactics stop working, and in that space, your power begins to rise. It's important to understand that consistency isn't about rigidity or perfection. It's about showing up for yourself again and again, even when you don't feel like it. Even when your emotions scream at you to react, to explain, to beg for clarity or closure. Real strength lies in choosing restraint, choosing silence, choosing peace even when it's hard. The more consistent you are, the less power they have to affect your emotional state. Over time, you'll notice a shift, not because they've changed, but because you have. You've stopped giving them the reactions they crave. You've stopped feeding the cycle. And in doing so, you've reclaimed your agency. This kind of consistency requires discipline. It demands self-awareness. It asks you to stay grounded in your values, even when faced with chaos. But the reward is immense. Freedom from the emotional roller coaster, clarity in your decisions, and the deep knowing that you are no longer a pawn in someone else's game. So if you find yourself slipping even once, don't despair. Recognize it, learn from it, and return to your center. Every moment is a chance to choose yourself again. Every interaction is an opportunity to reinforce the new standard. Because ultimately, consistency isn't just a strategy, it's a declaration. I am not who I used to be. I am not here to serve your needs. I am here to protect my peace, and I will do it every single day. And that, more than anything, is what makes you unstoppable. Consistency also exposes the truth about who holds the power. Narcissists thrive on a carefully constructed illusion that they are in control, that they dictate the emotional climate of the relationship, and that you need them to make sense of your own reality. They feed off reactions, drama, apologies, and emotional dependence. It's how they maintain dominance. But when you begin to act with consistency, especially around your boundaries, you disrupt that illusion. You start to reveal the truth. Power doesn't lie with them. It never did. It lies with you, the person who chooses how to show up, how to respond or not, and how to protect their peace. One of the most powerful moves you can make is to say, "I'm not available," and actually mean it not as a punishment or a manipulation tactic, but as a clear statement of personal agency. You're no longer bending to their schedule, their moods, or their demands. You're stepping out of the narrative they've built, where you're always waiting, hoping, or reacting. Instead, you take back the pen and begin writing your own story, one where you set the terms. This kind of shift might seem small from the outside, but internally it's seismic. It signals that you are no longer willing to be pulled into their orbit at their convenience. You're no longer chasing clarity or validation from someone who has no intention of giving it. You're choosing yourself, your energy, and your emotional well-being over the illusion of connection they dangle in front of you. And here's what happens when you do this consistently. The narcissist begins to lose their grip. They realize that yelling doesn't work anymore. Guilt trips don't land. Passive aggression goes unnoticed. Love bombing is met with calm detachment. The tools they've used for years to keep you entangled suddenly become ineffective. That's when confusion sets in on their end. They may lash out, test further, or try to regain control through manipulation. But if you hold steady, if you continue to show up for yourself without wavering, they begin to see the truth. You are no longer a source of emotional supply. You are no longer playing their game. What's more, you don't have to raise your voice or resort to dramatics to make your point. This kind of power isn't loud or aggressive, it's quiet, grounded, and unwavering. It comes from knowing your worth and refusing to negotiate it. It comes from understanding that true strength lies not in controlling others, but in mastering your own responses. When you speak with calm confidence and follow through on your words every time, without exception, you create a new dynamic. One where you decide when a conversation is appropriate, under what conditions it takes place, and whether it happens at all. You stop being reactive. You stop giving them the emotional fuel they crave. Over time, this consistent approach reshapes the entire foundation of the relationship or dismantles it completely, depending on what's healthiest for you. Either way, you come out stronger because you've learned to lead with self-respect rather than desperation. Consistency also builds credibility for yourself. You begin to trust yourself more when you see that you follow through on what you say. That inner trust becomes unshakable, and from that place, nothing the narcissist does can truly rattle you. So remember, you don't need chaos to assert your power. You don't need confrontation to reclaim your space. All you need is a quiet, confident voice and the discipline to follow through again and again and again. Because when you stay consistent, you don't just change the relationship dynamic. You change yourself. You become someone who knows their value, protects it fiercely, and refuses to settle for anything less than peace, clarity, and control over their own life. And that ultimately is the greatest form of freedom. What happens when you stop reacting? When you stop reacting and start responding with clarity and intention, something incredible happens. The narcissist begins to lose their grip. They're used to creating chaos intentionally or not and watching others unravel under pressure. That's how they maintain control, by keeping you emotionally off balance, always scrambling for resolution, validation, or peace. But when you remain calm, neutral, and firm in the face of provocation, you disrupt the entire system they've built around your emotional responses. Suddenly, their usual tactics, gaslighting, guilt-tripping, love bombing, silent treatments, or explosive outbursts, no longer work as expected. Their words no longer pierce through your armor. Their actions no longer throw you into a spiral of self-doubt or emotional turmoil. And that's when confusion sets in on their end. Because for so long, they believed they held the key to your emotions. They thought they could press a button and watch you react every time. But now, when they push, you don't budge. When they provoke, you don't lash out. When they disappear, you don't beg for answers. When they reappear, you don't rush back in. This shift is subtle from the outside, but seismic from within. You're no longer giving them what they need most, your emotional energy. You're reclaiming your power by choosing when, how, and if you engage. And this isn't just about restraint, it's about mastery over your own state of mind. Narcissists thrive on drama because it confirms their sense of superiority and control. They want to see you hurt, confused, desperate, or clinging to their presence. It feeds their ego and reinforces their belief that they are the center of your world. But when you stop giving them those reactions, you strip away their fuel. You become unpredictable, unmanageable, and ultimately uninteresting. They may try harder at first, doubling down on manipulation tactics in an attempt to regain the upper hand. This is known as the last gasp phase, an all-out effort to pull you back into the cycle. They might show up with flattery, promises of change, or sudden bursts of affection. Or they might go the opposite route, resorting to harsh criticism or cold indifference in hopes of triggering your fear of abandonment. But here's the thing, if you stay grounded, if you continue to respond, not react, you begin to expose the fragility beneath their facade. You start to reveal the truth they hate most, that their power was never real. It was borrowed from your willingness to give them your attention, your energy, and your emotional investment. And once that realization hits, they begin to fear you. Not in the way people fear someone dangerous or threatening, but in the way predators fear prey that suddenly becomes untouchable. You're no longer a source of emotional supply. You're no longer a pawn in their game. You're no longer feeding their need for control, admiration, or chaos. You've stepped out of the illusion. You've chosen peace over panic, clarity over confusion, and boundaries over desperation. You've stopped looking to them for validation and started grounding yourself in your own worth. And that kind of transformation cannot be undone. Eventually, many narcissists will disengage not because they've changed, but because you have. They move on to easier targets, people who still offer the emotional feedback loop they crave. And when that happens, you'll feel something unexpected, relief. Not sadness, not longing, but freedom. Because deep down, you know you didn't lose anything real. You simply let go of a performance that was never meant for you in the first place. So what happens when you stop reacting? You stop living in reaction to someone else's instability. You begin living on your own terms. You discover what it feels like to be truly free. And that freedom becomes your new foundation, one built not on approval, but on self-respect. Not on fear, but on clarity. Not on chaos, but on peace. That's the power of non-reaction. That's the strength of intentional response. And once you taste that kind of freedom, there's no going back. Fear is their response to your clarity. When you stand firm in your truth, unshaken by manipulation or guilt, the narcissist begins to tremble, not outwardly, but internally, where it truly matters. They rely on confusion, emotional coercion, and psychological dominance to maintain control. But when you refuse to be drawn into their web of distortions, when you see through their tactics with unwavering awareness, something shifts. You stop feeding them the chaos they crave, and in doing so, you strip away their power. Nothing terrifies a narcissist more than someone they can't control. Their entire existence revolves around influence over your thoughts, your emotions, your reality. Control is their oxygen, and when you begin to operate outside of their reach, you effectively cut off their air supply. They become disoriented, confused, annoyed, then frustrated, and eventually afraid. When you consistently refuse to engage on their terms, you become unpredictable, not in a chaotic way, not in the sense of being erratic or emotionally unstable, but in a powerful, grounded, deliberate way. You no longer react to their provocations. You don't fall for the bait. You don't scramble to defend yourself when they throw out false accusations or twisted logic. Instead, you pause. You observe. You respond, if at all, with calm detachment or assertive boundaries that cannot be ignored. And that unpredictability, it's your ultimate weapon, because narcissists thrive on patterns. They study your reactions, exploit your sensitivities, and then weaponize them against you. But when you break the cycle, when you stop giving them the same tired responses they expect, you disrupt their entire strategy. Suddenly, they're not the puppet masters anymore. They're floundering in unfamiliar territory, unsure of how to regain the upper hand. This shift doesn't happen overnight. It takes strength to walk away from the drama, courage to hold your ground, and discipline to remain centered in the face of provocation. But every time you choose clarity over confusion, peace over panic, and self-respect over submission, you reinforce a new identity, one that is untouchable, one that no longer bends to their will. In the end, the fear they feel isn't just about losing control. It's about realizing they never had it in the first place. And that realization that you are free is what haunts them most. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this journey, if not this moment, then somewhere along the way it's this: you deserve peace. Not just fleeting moments of calm between the chaos, not temporary relief when the storm passes, but deep, lasting peace. You deserve to live a life that isn't dictated by someone else's moods, lies, or need for control. You deserve to wake up without anxiety clawing at your chest, wondering what kind of emotional battlefield awaits you today. You deserve to live free from manipulation, toxicity, and emotional chaos. You deserve relationships that are built on honesty, respect, and mutual care, not power plays and psychological games designed to keep you off balance. And while it may feel impossible now, especially if you've spent years entangled with a narcissist or emotionally abusive personality, freedom is not only possible, it's already yours. It just has to be claimed. The first step toward achieving that peace is deciding deeply, consciously, and unshakably that you are no longer available for dysfunction. That might sound dramatic, even extreme, but it's not about being harsh, it's about being honest. Dysfunction thrives in ambiguity, in hesitation, in the space where you tell yourself, maybe this time will be different. But real healing begins when you draw a line in the sand and say, not anymore. Start small. Healing doesn't have to begin with grand declarations or confrontations. Begin with something simple, something manageable. Practice saying, I'm not available for this conversation, in low-stakes situations, when a friend tries to drag you into gossip, when a coworker wants to vent their frustrations all over you, or when someone insists on debating something that's clearly not about logic, but control. These tiny acts of boundary setting build muscle memory for the bigger ones. Use your voice, even if it trembles, especially if it trembles. Every time you speak up for yourself, every time you choose self-respect over compliance, you reinforce a new identity, one that refuses to shrink, one that knows its worth, one that honors its own needs. Then bring that same clarity into tougher interactions. When the narcissist in your life tries to reel you back in with guilt trips, false promises, or outright attacks, respond with grounded detachment. Don't explain, don't justify. Just state your truth and walk away if needed. I'm not engaging in this right now. This isn't productive for me. I won't tolerate disrespect. Those aren't weak statements, they're declarations of sovereignty. Remember, it's not about perfection, it's about commitment. Healing isn't a straight line. There will be days when you slip back into old patterns, when fear or loneliness makes you question your boundaries. That's normal. That doesn't mean you've failed. It means you're human. What matters most is whether you get back up, reaffirm your stance, and continue showing up for yourself even when it's hard. Because this isn't just about surviving another day of emotional warfare. It's about reclaiming your life. It's about choosing your peace, your joy, your future over someone else's need to dominate your reality. And every time you do that, you become stronger, clearer, and more untouchable than before. So keep going. Keep choosing yourself. Because you are worthy of peace. You always have been. And the moment you decide that you're no longer available for dysfunction is the moment your liberation begins. And now I want to issue you a personal challenge, one that might feel small in words, but has the power to create ripples far beyond this moment. Share this message with someone you know who might need to hear it. Maybe it's a friend who's been stuck in a cycle of emotional manipulation. Maybe it's a loved one who doesn't yet realize they're being controlled. Or maybe it's yourself, back when you first started searching for answers. Let's spread awareness together. So often, people caught in toxic dynamics don't even realize what's happening. They think they're the problem, that they're too sensitive, too emotional, not strong enough. But the truth is, they've been gaslit, manipulated, and worn down by someone who thrives on confusion and control. Awareness changes everything. It's the spark that starts the fire of healing, the first step toward reclaiming your sense of self. So let's empower each other. Healing doesn't have to happen in isolation. We were never meant to walk through pain alone. When we share these truths, when we speak up about what we've endured and how we've grown, we give others permission to do the same. We become mirrors of possibility, showing those still in the dark that there is a way out and that they are not alone. Together, we can create a community of strength, resilience, and self-respect. A space where people don't have to suffer in silence, where boundaries are honored, red flags are seen clearly, and healing is celebrated, not hidden. Imagine the power of a collective voice saying, enough. Enough with the manipulation, enough with the guilt, enough with living in fear of someone else's moods or demands. Imagine what it would feel like to belong to a group of people who truly understand and support one another. So, what are you waiting for? If you've made it this far, it means something shifted in you, even just a little. And that shift deserves movement. It deserves action. It deserves to be shared. Hit that share button. Let this message reach someone who needs it, even if that someone is you. Leave a comment below. Tell me how you're taking back your power. Whether it's setting a new boundary today, walking away from a toxic relationship, or simply recognizing the patterns for the first time, you are doing something brave. I'm rooting for you, every step of the way, because you deserve peace, you deserve freedom. And most of all, you deserve to live a life where your worth is never questioned because you finally believe it, deeply and without doubt. Now go out there and remind someone else they're worthy too.